Welcome to the Brain Body Fit podcast. I'm Dr. Jerome Rerucha, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise of fads and quick fixes and focus on proven strategies for optimizing your health and peak performance. Join me as we explore regeneration, anti-aging breakthroughs, nutrition, and the power of improving your physical and mental strength to unlock your brain and body's full potential. Welcome to the Brain Body Fit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jerome Rerucha. Today, once again, with Brain Body Fit, we're always trying to bring you the latest and greatest in the industries of anything that helps clinical applications and to improve our outcomes, as well as does this apply to the healthiest, strongest, fastest, flexible people in the world? And can we even make the healthiest people healthier than they are and far exceed their physical outcomes? So once again, this is a really exciting topic we're bringing you today. It's PEMF, Pulsed Electromagnetic Field Therapy. A lot of you are going to be familiar with that. If you're not familiar with it, you are going to learn a ton, as I have the founder of ERT. That's the brand specific we're going to be talking about, Electro-Regenerative Therapy. His name is David Petroviak. And I'm just going to put a slide up here for those of you who are following us on a computer that you could see this. Some of the pictures we're going to talk about if you're not familiar with PEMF, and even if you are, the differences that this machine has. But of course, you're going to get the information of his website where you can go look for more information. If you're not following along and you're driving in your car right now, it's completely fine. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, just before we really dive into this a little bit, why don't you just give us a very intro elevator speech of PEMF, and then we'll get started.
So PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Fields, and our machine also has frequencies. Been around for a long time. I'm sure we'll go over that later, and there are lots of devices on the market. We built one. It was developed initially by Nikola Tesla, and we built the one we felt was most accurate to his patent, and we've innovated a number of times since, and we get great results, and all our practitioners love the machine, so we're pretty proud of that.
And there's some very basic applications right now. I have a slide that's up. And so symptomatically, you can take the coil, and there's multiple things you can do with this specific coil, but you can just put it symptomatically, whether you have an acute or chronic injury to your wrist, low back, anywhere on the spine, headaches, of course, any extremity, knee pain, neuropathy, plantar fasciitis. So very, very simple to apply. You can just do it symptomatically. But then there's a whole nother level of understanding the system benefits you get here. This is not just for musculoskeletal problems, whether it's acute or chronic. People get a lot of benefit from this with very chronic visceral diseases, just overall weakness. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit. David has an extreme amount of experience of how he got into this himself, and a lot of experience into the clinical world himself. But then there is a difference in the technology of how he made this. And I can really attest to that, and I'll share later, because I've tried lots and lots of PEMFs over the years. And when I found this one, it was a significant difference maker for myself. And we were doing lots of research for literally 20 years, at least, before we concluded on this one. So, David, let's get started a little bit. And the slide we have up here is just kind of a good basic application. And you can expand on it way beyond this of some of the physiological basis that it provides at a cellular level.
You bet. So this is a slide that we kind of adapted from something Dr. Lou Arendt, a good friend of mine who passed away about a year ago, had up in his office. And he was trying to explain to his patients, because they were getting results they couldn't quite understand, magnified results on conditions they'd had, some of them for decades. And so he just came up with this. Lou was a great study. He had tons of literature he'd downloaded, and he just came up with this and put it on his wall. We kind of adapted it so it's a little more friendly for the computer. But your body's made up of systems. Systems are made up of organs. Organs are made up of cells. And ERT is like a battery charger for your cells. That's an absolutely true statement. So PEMF in general, not just my machine, but will charge up the cells. And what's interesting, and I didn't know this, I learned it from one of our practitioners, is that pH and the electrical potential of your cell are directly related. So as we raise the voltage in the cell, so goes your pH up to alkaline. And I'm sure everybody knows that most diseases don't work in an alkaline body, they only work in an acidic body. So it's charging you up. That does a lot of things. It helps people function better, be more alert, be more awake, you have better brain function, better physical activity, and they just feel brighter and better. So that's one of the benefits of PEMF technology in general, is that it will charge up your cells and make you less likely to have struggles fighting off a cold or the flu or really any disease. And it just enhances you. My wife's grandmother is 90, and we gave her a machine, and she uses it twice a day. And yesterday she was here, and she said she was feeling so great. She's 90, she's 4'11". She jumped off the ground and kicked her heels together and landed at 90 years old. And we were both shocked. We'd never seen that before. So
yeah, that is so great to see those things. Of course, we want clinical outcome improvements, but where we could really take this into a 3D gravity environment, and people tell you their quality of life changes. Even when we start getting performance changes, dealing with athletes, we know what your 40 time is, agility, many common lifts, sprinting, jumping is one of the big ones. But make no mistake, as we get older, the intensity decreases and some of our performance aspects increase. But when we get flattened and explosive activity is one of the first things to leave the body. So even the ability of jumping, if she was not on a jumping program per se, and even if she was, just using ERT at that age and just seeing that, definite change in general physical preparedness, as it's called, it's fantastic. And we see this in the clinic all the time with people of the stories that they share. And it's really exciting to bring this in. So again, you did a really good job explaining just a little bit of the generals into the cells, but this goes all the way down to the mitochondria, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, because that's such a hot topic right now, and it should be. The healthier your mitochondria are, the healthier you're going to be. And so anything we can do to measure that in terms of an exam of what is the vitality of your mitochondria. So a lot of great functional lab tests out there. Again, still taking it into an exercise phys world and clinical examinations and understanding the breakdown of the systems in the cells and how mitochondria is involved in every single cell in your body except mature red blood cells. And so again, our mitochondria efficiency decreases with age, toxins, poor nutrition, all these things that are so common right now. And the mitochondria is a really big movement out there, as well as it should be. So I just want to really reinforce with people, because we got some real serious biohackers on here, people that are really well-read clinicians. Mitochondria may be at the top of the list. And I just want to make sure everybody knows this is influencing the mitochondria directly, and then how it affects all those other system benefits that are just so well known as well. So even taking it back a little bit to the history, why don't you don't have to work off this slide. I put some basics on there. Obviously, going back to Tesla, why don't you just kind of take us up a little bit from the history of PEMF and ultimately how you got into it?
Yeah, so the history is Nikola Tesla developed it. Depending on which book you read, they kind of disagree. But in the 1880s and around 1883, according to what I've read, there are other opinions or stories, but he took it into a hospital in Dresden, Germany. Now, back then, the electronics were much bigger, as we know, and so it was the size of a train car, and it actually was built into a train car. It was taken to a hospital in Dresden, Germany. There might have been more than one, but it just was a hospital in Dresden, Germany, as far as what I've read. And they pulled it into the hospital. They started treating patients for all kinds of little chronic problems, and they started seeing massive change in people in minutes rather than months or years. So Tesla called it the life force machine, and in some of his literature, he claimed that it kept him alive. I think it was the last 20 or 30 years of his life. He said the only reason he was alive was because of the life force machine, and he used it daily, sometimes more than once daily. So that's kind of the Tesla story. And then they're actually still operating machines in Germany that are in a 6 foot by 6 foot. It's a 6 by 6 by 6 cube in a room in hospitals or doctors' offices. And they just have the controls on the wall and the connections for the wires for the pad on the wall. And some of those are still being used today. So it's lasted, well over 100 years. What would it be? Going on 145, 150 years. So that was Tesla. And then it kind of took off in other ways. There have been various people that have made machines. And unfortunately, at one point, there became something available that could fire the pulse rather than having a spark jump a gap, which is the way Tesla designed it. And it's incredibly inexpensive. So most of the manufacturers, all but one besides me, went with that. And a lot of people develop low power machines, and there's a lot of arguments between low power and high power, which is better. So I just made our machine so it's adjustable from 0 to the highest power that's available in a PEMF machine on the planet. So we actually doubled the power at one point because of neuropathy patients wanting more power, and they were getting huge results. And I thought if we double the power, maybe we'll get better results, and we did. So it came to this country, it went all over the world. It's incredibly popular in a lot of countries, including Australia. The US, it was less so because it was making huge progress on a lot of conditions, and people didn't need the traditional allopathic things, medicine and surgery, as much anymore. So the FDA kind of beat it down and tried to get rid of it. The one thing the FDA has approved the technology for, nobody's machine in particular, is for non-union fracture healing. And we've seen bone healing now in our 14 and a half roughly years in business. My wife broke her shoulder. I had some broken bones. Different things have happened. My wife's grandfather fell off an 11-foot high ladder and broke his pelvis in 4 places. And I'm sure you know that anybody over 55 that breaks their pelvis in 4 places has a less than 50% chance of surviving it. And he's now 90 and in great shape and doing well with all 4 fractures totally healed in about 5 months at age. He turned 89 while he was still using the machine to fix the fracture, and now he still uses the machine every single day. So that's a little bit of our history. So there have been all kinds of different machines. Some work better than the others, and we think ours is the best, and we've re-innovated it a number of times to come up with something we felt gave the very best benefit. And we're still working on combining some other modalities with it. For instance, we had Dr. Dina Rabo. Her dad fell off a ladder and had a traumatic brain injury. She used a low-level cold laser on him at the same time she used our machine. And we have videos on our social media and stuff. He healed extremely rapidly and fantastic results. And when she saw that, she called and said, I need a second machine. So it's very effective at helping people and without drugs or surgery, which is awesome.
Yeah, how I got into this is, teaching seminars for as long as I have and being at the big national shows, you kind of get to see truth withstands time and the latest and greatest. So PEMF has been aggressively in the industry probably the entire time I've been a clinician. I say definitely soon after I became a clinician, it probably got even more popular with marketing, other companies. So it was everywhere. And to this day, it is here to stay. It's not a fad modality. It's not going anywhere. It's really amazing. But I tried all those machines, and I never am the person who says, well, if it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work. Not tooting my own horn, but I do take a lot more proactive care of myself. We do very structured eating, lifting to levels of competition for myself and other people. We have tons of data analytics on how we measure physiology, radiology, lab testing, functional medicine, human metrics. And I tore an ACL when I was 14. This knee has always been pretty fussy. I could do a lot with it, but it's required a lot of time and effort of stretching, strengthening. Thank God chiropractic adjustments and these types of things all help a toes to nose correction part of it. But it is a constant aspect so it doesn't age too much faster than the rest of my body. I even had 8 stem cell shots in it prior to being a part of my current stem cell lab, specifically an exosome lab ourselves. Once again, we're always looking for better. Stem cells always intrigued me, and I knew they worked. I had a number of different kinds by people who said they were the world expert. I'm not saying I didn't get anything out of it. I thought I would have gotten a little bit more out of it. So then a mutual friend of ours, Mark Funderlich, who you've known, Dr. Funderlich, much longer than I have even, and he's directly involved with this. He was ultimately the one that introduced this with me because we had a share of stem cell and exosome interest, and we were starting to do some anti-aging seminars together, going to other clinics. And in the meantime, Dr. Mark would bring his PEMF machine, this exact machine. And I'll be the first to admit, I kind of dismissed it a little bit because I had so much experience trying every other unit out there. And again, not saying it didn't work, but it didn't work for me. I mean, we do things that have huge impacts, You know, we've taken people from scratch and have coached many world champions in a variety of different sports where we don't work on them. We start from scratch. We teach them how to do everything. And then once we get too busy, you know, we have coaches all over that will pass them on. But especially if we're reversing their health problems that even stopped them from training, it's like nobody's allowed except us. Everybody's fired, or we do everything for them. And so when we're at these stem cell events that we're doing with people, and Dr. Mark's treating people off to the side, and to no surprise, everybody's raving, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And there's a very noticeable stimulus with this. So just that alone, if it didn't do anything, people would think, oh my gosh, I can feel it, it's working. And so again, you know, I kind of just dismissed it, but I followed up with the people that Dr. Mark was doing this on. And it would be 2 days later, a week later, and all of them were still raving. And so many of them had specific symptoms that the stem cells didn't help immediately of that. So many people had back pain, neck pain, plantar fasciitis, like you name it. And just from the machine, even before they got the stem cell shot, they were like, oh my gosh, that's so much better. You know, like nobody said they weren't 50% better, and even range of motion, moving around, things that we would do some exams. And like I said, at first it's like, oh, you know, that's nice, a little placebo effect. Plus, I know there's some validation to it, but it was how I followed up with the people. And I'm like, okay, that is not my normal experience. Now what these people are really sharing with me. Right at that same time, I started doing it, and I've got more data on my knee than anybody has probably on any condition in their entire history. And I don't give fads credit. So when I first started doing it, it was kind of like, yeah, maybe I'm having just a better than average week that I'm used to. But then as just time went on, it's like, wow, it's really getting better. Like, I mean, noticeably better. And that has maintained. So this has been just a fantastic addition for myself personally. Now I've been using it, you know, pushing 2 years. This is not a new podcast. I don't do something that works for a week and go, oh my gosh, I can't wait to share this. Like, we've had a lot of experience, a lot of personal use on it, use with other people. And it has really been consistently outstanding and very, very different than any other PEMF I have used in the past. Even when I rented them, I've used them for periods of time. And again, not saying they didn't do anything. I'm not saying anything out there isn't validated, but this was a significant difference maker. So before we deep dive too much, you know, let's just touch base for the audience of some of the common ones out there. I mean, here's a list of 10 that I have on here. You could just kind of take us through it. These are all very common. Of course, bone healing's at the top, which a lot of people, if you weren't aware that the FDA actually did clear this, and that's a big deal. I mean, non-union bone fractures, that's a very unique thing to heal. And this has proven more than consistent and effective for it, but it doesn't stop there. So why don't you take us through some of these very common basics that therapists use this for? But of course, then we're going to go into some of the more non-traditional things that people may not be aware of.
Sure. Yesterday, just as a side note to do with this, I was at a clinic locally here that's very well known. The doctor's world famous, and he has a machine. They had some patients had questions, and I ran over to treat actually the wife of the patient. She was having some issues. Well, she's got a number of issues, and we were talking, and they were kind of confused. So I just want to highlight one thing, and I'm sure everybody on the podcast knows, but it's worth restating, and that is that we're just really electrical beings. How do we pronounce death on the brain? When there's no more electrical activity, and when there's no more electrical activity in the body, we pronounce someone dead. So our cells are creating mitochondrial function to create voltage to run all these organs, your eyes, your brain, everything, all your tissue, because it requires voltage for you to stay alive. When your voltage drops, maladies come in and you have issues. So if you take away the electrical activity, you have a corpse. And it was kind of foreign to the patients. They kept kind of misunderstanding what I was saying. So I said, well, you know, we're really all just battery-powered robots, and our batteries are the mitochondrial function in our cells. And I had to explain a little bit, and they suddenly, you could see the light come on, and they went, oh, okay, now this makes sense, because the machine does a lot more than just charge up your cells and accelerate mitochondrial function, in some cases, thousands or tens of thousands of times, and I can tell stories about that. But it's going to do a ton of things, and I like to tell people that as proud as I am of the ERT and as many people as we've seen healed, the truth is the machine does a handful of things, and I can explain those, but what it really does that makes a difference, I believe, is that it supercharges your body to heal itself. And I'm a believer that your body knows how to heal everything and do it absolutely perfectly if it's just provided the right amount of energy, and the right kind of food and supplements and that kind of stuff. But if your batteries are fully charged, so to speak, it's tough to get really ill or stay really ill for a long time. And most of us can attest to the fact that usually when we get run down is when we get ill or have problems. Obviously, injuries and stuff like that are a little bit different. So I'll run through these. So bone healing, PEMF, and you spoke about non-union fracture, kind of the same thing, but one, there's a gap where the bone's not touching. That traditionally required extra surgery where they take bone from the hip or the femur and they bridge the gap. And there was, it was a lot of surgery for somebody who had a broken bone that had a gap in it. And so with ERT, we don't need the bone touching. And the FDA had approved that years ago, just in general, nobody's machine in particular. And when I broke, I think we're going to go through this, I broke my wrist and my arm in a fall off of the second floor that I was building. My friend ended up doing something I asked him not to, and what I was standing on fell. I fell, I got a traumatic brain injury and broke my arm and wrist on my right arm. And when I got home, I just started using the machine right away because I knew what it did. And it felt kind of like a sewing machine, and I didn't have a non-union, but it felt kind of like, you could almost feel like a spark. It kind of felt like a sewing machine. It wasn't very painful or anything. It was a little bit, it was noticeable. I wouldn't say it was painful. And I did that for, I think, a week, and I was fully healed. Now I'm 50. That was, I'll have to look and see what year that was, 4 or 5 years ago. I'm 56. I'll be 57 this year, and I'm in pretty decent health. But we've got other stories of rapid bone healing. Pamela McDougall, who trains doctors, she called me, said she had a radial distal fracture, right arm. She was walking and fell, and she was a month and a half, I think, from turning 70. And her arm healed in 4 weeks, is what the doctors say. And it was completely healed. And they said she healed at the rate of a 16-year-old athletic girl. That's pretty rare in the world. It's pretty common with our machine. We've seen that too many times to count, especially the elderly. When they break a bone, it can take a long time to heal. It might not heal perfectly. And with ERT, it heals very quickly. The pain goes away almost instantly. Pam said, I'm not familiar really well with distal radial fracture, but she said the doctors told her, here's a big bottle of pain pills. You're going to have to take these. This is an extremely painful fracture. They put her in a splint because she had a lot of swelling. The ERT took the swelling out in a day and a half, and in 3 sessions, I believe it was, and they were able to put a cast on her a week later when she went back in. But she never had to take pain pills, and that's her testimonials on our social media, I believe, and you can watch that.
And some of the key points, I really want to exaggerate that too, that as a clinician, and I'm a chiropractor, so we're not doing surgeries. And for the most part, we're not an urgent care clinic. We help people with a lot of chronic pain, a lot of chronic visceral diseases, of course, acute back pain, whiplash, those things we have a tremendous amount of experience for. But when it comes time to a broken arm, going to the chiropractor, probably not your ideal first stop in those types of things. But I want to make the point to the consumers and doctors listening to this that maybe a lot of people are only using this because my neck hurts, my back hurts, whether it's osteoarthritis or it's an acute trauma. But this right here is a good example. Like, don't underestimate using this on severe and urgent care necessary conditions. And even if you're like, oh my gosh, my experience with PEMF is it was really intense. It's fantastic, the range of intensity you can sit with these things. I mean, you can not feel it at all, but still there's profound healing that's happening. And of course, you can turn it up to where this thing will knock you off the table. And,
right.
There's time and a place for more intensity with PEMF, which is kind of contraindicated. There's other modalities out there that less is more. And, but this is one of them that I've incredibly liked a lot because of the intensity variations. And then what you did with the technology, maybe we'll get into it, that the machine automatically does a number of things. Like, I don't have to overly obsess and micro set all these different things. It's so easy to use, as we have things that I enjoy about it, that they're so detailed with the variables that we can program in different frequencies and intensities and all sorts of things. But this was also so refreshing to me because we're not a big modality clinic. So the other thing is, like, We've used lasers for a long time, and that's what a lot of people associate with me from a teaching standpoint. Prior to doing podcasts, was zirconia low-level lasers, and but that was the only modality. Now, don't get me wrong. I started out of school with ultrasound, with E-stim. I've got acupuncture, electrical aspects. I've got auricular therapy, microcurrents, and there was nothing that any of those did besides zirconia lasers that it's like, we're super serious about our healthy eating programs, our functional medicine, ninja adjustments, stretching and strengthening. If you're not willing to be proactive in my clinic, you're not coming into my clinic. And right. It just with that, we're used to putting people on stage and transforming them to where they walk down the street and people are like, oh my gosh, what happened to you? We're just kind of a gym with clinical experience to agree. We like those big life transformations. And so I'm always open-minded. I always like to try things, and I love technology. So much great neurotechnology out there, so many great things to examine people with. But there's just not that many things that I really felt like, oh my gosh, with outcome. That's why we started going stem cells and exosomes and peptides. Those are the types of things that have really worked well. So again, not looking for a modality, but when I found yours, it was like, whoa, okay, this is really doing something above and beyond to this high level intensity of structured programs we're providing for people. And it has maintained it. So not only did it catch my attention and open my eyes, it has not disappointed me in the 2 years that we've been using this very aggressively. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful adjunct into what we do. And we have a higher standard of critique probably than most people. So just going down now, this would be real common for people. We'll kind of lump these together. It says decreasing inflammation, acute and chronic pain management. I'll just let you expand on that as well. This episode of the Brain Body Fit podcast is brought to you by Dr. Mag's Feet First System and Orthotics. Your feet are the foundation of your body, with 26 bones and over 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments supporting you every day. Research shows that every human has some degree of collapse and dysfunction of one or more of the three arches of each foot, and this can contribute to injuries in your feet, ankles, knees, hips, and back. Introducing Dr. Mag's Feet First System, starting with custom quality orthotics for just $139. With 40 plus years of expertise, Dr. Mag's Orthotics helps prevent pain and injury and support structural correction and healing for existing conditions. Don't let your feet slow you down. Visit drtimmags.com now and use BBF for 10% off your purchase. The link will be in the podcast description. Step confidently with Dr. Mag's Feet First Orthotics. Your feet will thank you.
So decreasing inflammation, we've got a lot of stories, but the machine, when it puts that pulse through you, it causes forced cellular respiration. So your cells are going to squeeze. They're going to pull in nutrients, do their mitochondrial function, and pump out the waste. When you've got a sore spot, and I'm sure all the docs know this, and I'm not a doctor in any way, shape, or form, it's going to cause those cells to become kind of rigid, and I like to think of them kind of as constipated, and you'll get a sore spot. And then you might go get a massage or whatever. You put pain rub on that heats you up and cools you down. What that's doing is flushing blood through and trying to get those cells to work again. Or with massage, it's mechanical cellular respiration. They're actually squeezing those cells with massage with their hands. With ERT, we're doing that on an electronic level, or with PEMF in general, we're doing it on an electronic level. It's important that the waveform match up. It's important that the intensity and waveform match up, and the speed of the pulse. And those were all things initially I had separate you could adjust, and it just seemed like nobody anywhere could figure it out. So it took a long time, and we figured out how to build that into the mechanism, into the machine, and now it's controlled by the machine. So yeah, our machine has an on-off button, a timer switch, and an adjustment. And that's the only thing you got to do. And we always run below the patient's pain threshold. So for decreasing inflammation, we would turn the machine up to the higher end of low or the lower end of medium. And we have seen people who their arm was massively swollen. A friend of my wife's was going to go get her wedding ring cut off. Stopped by, talked to my wife, and my wife said, let's put you on the ERT. And in 20 minutes, her arm was normal size. And that's just an effect of those cells getting electromagnetically respirated, pretty much like our body would do. Very similar, with a very, very similar waveform with our machine, and our machine only, unfortunately. But it's going to cause that inflammation, that swelling to go down. Now, it doesn't matter if that's externally visible or not. It could be in a hip joint inside. It's going to reduce that inflammation massively. And probably the number one comment we get when we first put the machine on somebody and run it If we're doing a back or a sacrum or a hip or sciatic nerve, shoulder, arm, anything like that, knee, is they'll stand up and they'll go, whoa, I'm way more relaxed and it's way more flexible and it's not as tight and tense. That's because we've just helped the body to flush nutrients through those cells, get those cells working properly again, and the soreness goes away typically 100% with anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes on the ERT. So it's really effective for that. And we've got a lot of chiropractors are probably our main guys, and I love them. And they will, a lot of guys as they age and they're adjusting 50 or more people a day, their hands, their wrists, their elbows, their shoulders, their neck will just start having issues because they're doing a lot of hard work all day. So a lot of times I found out my docs are using it on themselves to take away their pain and inflammation so they can adjust well and don't have to deal with any aggravation like that. Acute pain management is one of the main things that's known for the technology PEMF, and it does a number of different things that would take hours for us to discuss, but it can take pain that's pretty excruciating and in just minutes reduce it to half, and in a few more minutes reduce it to half of that, and it'll just keep going down until it's not an issue or it is completely gone. It's rare that we have to put someone on the machine for longer than 30 minutes to get rid of that pain, and then oftentimes it's gone in 10 to 15. Depends what we're dealing with. We're talking about some pretty severe pain, sprained ankles, stepped in a hole playing soccer, twisted their knee and it swells up like a balloon. We're talking low back pain, sciatic pain, those kind of things, and that pain just goes away really quick, sometimes in just a few minutes. Chronic pain management, those are things that just keep recurring. A lot of times that's a more dull pain, but in some cases it's a sharp pain. Either or, we talk about where to place the coils, understanding why to place the coils, where you place them, and how you do it. And when one of our practitioners gets it and they do it right, they are able to take this chronic pain and reduce it and reduce it. Sometimes the patient may have to come back 10 times, 20 times, depending on how bad it is, how acute and chronic. And then people will say, I got my life back. I don't have that pain anymore. It doesn't occur anymore. And my docs call me and say, did you know this does this? And did you know it does that? And usually I say yes, but we've developed our business around what our practitioners have told us. And that's how we've learned all the conditions it treats, because we honestly didn't know in the beginning. We knew a lot of things it did, but we've learned so much from our practitioners. So chronic pain, and I've got practitioners who have chronic pain, guys who are getting up in age or had a serious injury or were in a car wreck or something like that, and they've got a problem, and it makes it difficult for them to function and see their patients and take care of them. And so they're impacted in every way you can imagine, including making money to survive. And so they'll use the machine on themselves and they'll say, this thing saved my life. It's a very common thing we get. And those guys have usually been to the surgeons, the physical therapists. They've been to through the pain management, through pills, and they don't want to do that, or it affects them negatively. And so we can usually make a huge dent, if not totally solve that for those guys. So it's been a blessing for a lot of people, myself included, because I've dealt with a lot of different things.
Of course, we want to see symptomatic improvements in our patients, and it really is like, even for me to say this, I'm a system guy, in terms of we're going to put people on treatment programs, very realistic treatment programs, fairly aggressive to the point when I say that, it's like, I'm going to do things for you you can't do for yourself. And many of them you might not be able to get in most places, no matter where you go, but I need you to heal when you're not in front of me. So, to what you're saying, though, when we do use the PEMF, we do see it would be so rare that I don't see a symptomatic relief in first visit. Like something doesn't happen. Honestly, I can't even think of a case that has not happened. But then to your point, it's like, look, you could still take 20 treatments, 30 treatments in some extreme situations. There's a lot of sick people out there. And I couldn't even imagine working on those people without doing detailed healthy eating. We always have people say, oh, I eat pretty good. I just had another new patient, just started 2 weeks ago. He had some incurable autoimmune disease. And right away, first day, he's like, I eat pretty good. And I'm like, okay, hold that thought. Now, 2 weeks later, he came in for a second. He's like, man, now I know what real healthy eating is. And he is just kicking butt. So there's always that reality check to people. So symptomatically, this has been incredibly awesome. But I also want to tell people, that if a miracle doesn't happen right in front of you and their pain, just like David said, doesn't go down 2.5 hours down to like 90%, it's like, don't think the machine doesn't work. Like there are some seriously sick, degenerated people out there, especially at a cellular level. So that's super important. Going back even to people who do need surgeries. Again, I'm a chiropractor. We deal with a lot of people. We prevent a ton of surgeries in people. However, people do need surgeries at certain times. And so I don't play the Psychic Friends Network. I just always ask them, it's like, well, what did the surgeon tell you? Like, what is the next time you're meeting for your follow-up? What is their expectation? Like, where is your recovery and health going to be at that time? So I take all those notes down because surgeons and the physical therapists that they may generally work at, they do that's common reviews that they give people before surgery, immediately after surgery. Here's what you can expect. Go home and do this. And I want to know, where do they expect you in 6 weeks with your first review? Where does the surgeon, where does the physical therapist expect you in 8 weeks or whatever? And we shatter those results. I mean, when people come into us, if I don't improve that by 50%, I consider that a failure. But this has been a huge positive to help us with those things. And of course, sometimes people buy these for themselves, even consumers. These things are great. I tell people, if you're going to live in life, you either need your own laser at home or you need a PEMF at home. And hopefully you can get both, because these are two perfect complements you can do together. They function differently from a physiological standpoint, though ultimately they both affect the systems of the body, cellular communication, the electrical components, but they do work different. One does not do what the other does, but we use them together all the time. But even just using one or the other. And so it's just been really exciting. But for doctors out there, use that cheat sheet. Even if the patient comes to you before they need surgery, just say, okay, these are the key things I really need you to ask the surgeon. Like, what is your expectation? When is the first visit back after my surgery? What's the expectation? Because we want to know those timelines, because what we do works. And it generally speaking, it's always like 50% faster what we're doing on those things. And it's not just symptomatic relief, which is super important through the eyes of the patient, but it's on data analytics, like bones that are broken and they show healed on X-ray or MRI, like profound changes within the time they're going to do that. Lab testing changes. We're using data analytics that are irrefutable in order to prove the point, but of course through the eyes of the patient as well, of how they're doing so well. A lot of this list you touched on, with the soft tissue repair, with what you already spoke of, improved circulation, edema reduction. Let's just pause just a little bit on muscle recovery and performance. Not even just from the injury standpoint, like the athletic training room, physical therapists, chiropractors, but what would you comment on that about people who are really pushing the limits? They're healthy, and whether they're mountain biking, I know you got a lot of experience with that, sprinters, competitive weightlifters, fighters, just even distance runners, long, slow, and steady, but anything that we're talking about performance.
That's, distance runners are a big deal, because no matter how good they are, I don't care if it's the world's fastest Kenyan, their bodies are taking a beating in these marathons, and recovery time is a big deal. That's why they don't go from marathon to 2 days later a marathon, or even a week or two later. They need time to recover and heal. These individuals are incredibly healthy and they heal at a fantastic rate. But we can accelerate that rate, and sometimes, I don't want to sound crazy, but we can cut it in half, and sometimes we can cut it by 90%. Depends on the person. There is some individual, like you talk about, diet, supplementation, how old are they, how good is their body functioning, that kind of stuff. But if they're doing things right, we've seen such insanely rapid results that I didn't believe them. And when they'll go and they'll get the x-rays and that kind of stuff, like my wife's grandfather, 88 when he fell, 89 while he was still healing, 5 months to heal 4 fractures. So I'll be clear on this. 5 months later, he went in roughly, and they did the MRI, and he had healed 3 of the 4 fractures 100%, and 1 of the fractures 96%. At 89 years old. And with no surgery, he did not accept screws, bolts, and plates. He just went to the hospital. He was in the kind of shape where when we went to see him in the hospital, He's a tall, skinny guy. Every area of his body was black and blue because his circulatory system was so weak, so that falling from 11 feet and hitting the ground, he was literally black and blue, his legs, his arms, everything. I'd never seen that in my life. And I thought, this is a really dire situation, because if his circulatory system's that weak, and I don't want to say he was weak, but it was a big fall, and he turned black and blue everywhere, clear down to his hands and feet, that he was able to heal that pelvis in 5 months, or 3 of the 4 fractures 100%, the fourth 96%. And he was flexible. He could move. When and the funny part is, and you'll love this, when we took him a machine, he's an old cowboy kind of guy, and he said, David, you and I both know this box is a piece of blank and it doesn't do anything. And I said, Merlin, the truth is, this is the only thing that's going to keep you alive. So you can choose to die, or you can use the machine and get well and stay alive and feel good. And there were a lot more. I would waste hours telling you the whole story, but eventually he fell in love with the machine and uses it constantly. They still have it. And grandma's healthier than ever. And they love it. So it became a big part of their lives. It healed them, and the doctors were blown away. And we have hundreds of cases I could bore you with all day about how somebody healed so quick. The doctors were just, how is this possible? Right now in Madison, Wisconsin, there are 3 infectious disease doctors who are trying to figure out how Dr. Scott Heinrich's wife, Wendy Heinrich, who's also a doctor, chiropractor, how her hip, long story, healed in the time it did, and how she got over the infection as quick as she did. And then when they actually put the hip replacement back in after the infection was cleared, that she was walking in 2 days with no pain. So these are healthy people that are active and take care of themselves and eat well. And she had a hip replacement because she had both hips replaced when she was in her 40s, because she had been a gymnast and done damage. And they think there was an infection in the left hip from the surgery that just took 10 years to really get a hold, and then it took over and went into her gluteus. And there was a lot of fear there about it going septic. We met him at the Wisconsin Chiropractor Show. He's a friend of Dr. Funderlich, and Dr. Funderlich was there to do a speech. And so when we found out about it, we sent him home with the machine to heal his wife, and he was very resistant about it, which is kind of funny. But we have all the text messages and that kind of stuff, and they love it. And I loaned it to him because he was a friend of Dr. Mark Funderlich, and they decided to buy it. So it does a lot for that. People heal quicker. They feel better. There's less pain. They sleep better. When I've had surgeries, the worst thing for me was not being able to sleep because of the pain. And I wish that when I was younger and had those surgeries, I'd had the ERT, because I would have slept well.
Yeah, I'm blessed. I have this much of my life yet, and I'm getting the benefits of it. But there's no doubt. I mean, we all look back and go, oh my gosh, what would have happened if I had this at that time? And, being an athlete, being a coach as well, being a strength coach, we want to prevent more problems than we treat. I mean, that's the whole purpose of being a strength coach. And even as a chiropractor, I definitely have that. A lot of people go, I don't need a chiropractor. My neck and back don't hurt. And I'm like, you have no idea what we do or what we're capable of doing.
Right.
But on top of that, I get it from a patient perspective. I had a great experience, younger, that didn't brainwash me into just that. But when you do talk about athletics, I mean, of course, first you just got to get a routine. You got to figure a few things out. But if you get some good coaching and you put some good effort into it, after the first year of the big jumps and improvements you're going to do, you have to focus on recovery. And the more you get your recovery down, so through LifeBase, I mean, John there, he has custom recovery drinks made, as he owns a supplement store. So, he buys thousands of them at a time, and we're on his short list that we get to carry those things. So we take recovery very serious to the elite of the elite world-class athletes. And this is still an extra adjunct beyond what your nutritional recovery is going to be. Now, that's great. You can do that at home. But every sport has a predisposition to certain injuries, whether it's basketball. You're going to be looking at super high ankle sprains. some knee twisting, same with football. Tennis, you're going to get more tennis elbow, more carpal tunnel, still predisposed to some of the foot injuries, all the pounding on the concrete. So when we want to prevent those things, number one, take the history of the person. Where is their current weak links and things that already can act up for them? Want to be proactive with it. But of course, after hard sessions, after tournaments, like people fight to rent these things because it is such a huge change when they have to push their body 5 days in a row in a tournament, no matter what age they are. The recovery is incredibly massive, and we've already mastered the nutritional recovery for people. And it's things like this that other people they're competing against have mastered the nutritional recovery as well. So when we're providing these things, there's some very, very noticeable differences and great stories we get to hear from people too, whether it's over a symptomatic area like, oh, my crummy knee, or my left foot's been bothering me, but this helps keep it in check, or just the overall. It's like, holy cow, this is third day of the mountain bike race. I did 70 miles the last 2 days, and you just crawl into your tent at the end. And come morning, they're like, I have never felt this good on day 3, 4, and 5, like ever, So it's super exciting to hear those things. And we'll jump to the next page, see where we're at. Now, also, to add validation to it, PEMF has been around a long time, but I know we've got doctors on here, we've got consumers on here, we've got athletes, we've got coaches. One of the things is I've taught so many clinical seminars is people really like validation with research. And the great news is a lot of the natural healthcare practitioners, they don't get stuck only in the research. They kind of like cutting edge things. And even if it's not researched, if it makes sense, if it makes physiological sense, they're still proactive to it. But no matter which side you're on, definitely there's research on this. So just in PubMed, I have a screed up that just kind of shows what the search was from a day ago. So if you typed in Pulsed Electromagnetic Field, or PEMF, those exact words, Pulsed Electromagnetic Field or PEMF, you would get 4,589 results popped up. And that's just on a consumer internet. If you were in a university, there would even be more of them. But there's hundreds of different symptoms that they're doing this on, an incredible amount of bone healing, and that even includes osteoporosis and those things. But there are so many conditions that validate what they're doing. So I'm just going to run through a few of these. Here's specific. We can type in for a search, pulsed electromagnetic field and fracture. 319 results show up. Pulsed electromagnetic field in stem cells, there's 157 results showed up. And this was an eye-opener for me. This episode is brought to you by Viplate Whole Body Synchronous Vibration Platforms. If you're seeking an additional health and performance edge, Viplate transforms exercise, recovery, rehab, and aging. Unlike typical vibration that uses a shaking stimulus, Viplate's parallel wave synchronous vibration technology enhances and integrates muscle and brain connection like no other. Not only does Viplate increase recruitment and improve neuromusculoskeletal function, it coordinates the brain-body communication and piezoelectric activity. For athletes, Viplate optimizes warm-up and cool-down and can be used during peak performance exercises. With most units rated for 2,400 pounds, it's built for heavy lifting, intense training, and lasting durability. In rehab, it's a true game changer, accelerating circulation and recovery for sprains, strains, post-surgery, concussions, and many more measurable benefits to both patients and clinicians. For the elderly, it promotes graceful aging, preserving physical and mental health, even aiding those with severe degenerative conditions. Great for at-home use. Go to Viplate.com to see all available models. At checkout, use code BBF15 to receive 15% off. That is BBF15 and advance your health and performance today. So I got introduced to your machine right about the time. Now, I had over 10 years of stem cell experience where I was using other people's stem cells. And I'm fortunate. I've met a lot of amazing cutting edge people, medical doctors as well. And so I was involved in a couple stem cell projects, prior to this. And they helped me. Again, I always thought, I thought there would be a little bit more. And then luckily I met the guy who runs our lab now that I'm a part of. And that was a whole different level with that. But I was also pleasant surprised that this is what Dr. Funderlich and I really started talking about too. So I also knew with lasers, I was involved in one of the stem cell projects that when we could pre-laser an area that we were going to inject with stem cells, it was profound how the stem cells stayed in that area. And it would also even create some really unique thing with a radioisotope dye that they did specific to that. But I learned over 10 years ago, you pre-treat the area that you're going to put stem cells in. And then, of course, when you can affect the mitochondria with light therapy or electrical like this, that it's even going to help the profound results because it's the energy that drives the physiology. It's not the other way around.
Right.
Even though it is a loop in time, but ultimately it's the energy that drives the physiology. Well, this was the same thing. So when I saw the symptomatic benefits that were occurring in this one with Dr. Funderlich and I, we were there for stem cells, but he was doing this on the side. And then just immediately it made sense based upon the experience the people had. And they shared with me whether it was 2 days, a week later at their profound sustained results and continued improvement results. But I was kind of amazed. I had no idea at that time, even as much as I've looked into stem cells and even lasers in stem cells and nutrition in stem cells, I had no idea PEMF in stem cells, but then it just made complete sense. So since stem cells are a very important thing of what we're doing and we're involved in that entire industry moving forward, that was so exciting for me to know how PEMF further enhances, if you're getting a stem cell shot, the physiological enhancements that it will do to even getting that stuff to graft into the cells faster, to promote that life-sustaining energy in the body. And it has been a significant difference, and not just on our patients that we see, but even myself. I had a lot of experience with stem cells and other modalities. Most of them I didn't think did much for me. But this has been incredibly positive on lots and lots of different avenues, and especially in this industry of stem cells, telling people, get your stem cell injections. Don't wait till you're stage 4 and you've got 4 weeks to live. I think that's the biggest mistake people make. It's like when you got a significant weak link, it's like just jump in. And I know not everybody can afford it, and it's got to be realistic. But I see people wait too long before they try stem cells, that it's like, you've had this problem for 30 years severely. Like, why did you wait till just now? But
some people don't know about it, and some people think stem cells are illegal in the world. In the US.
Yeah, we're going to have a whole lecture on that because it is amazing to me how many doctors don't think stem cells are legal in the United States. And these are even medical doctors. And I'm sitting here going, I can have them overnighted to your place tomorrow morning. Well, you can't do umbilical stem cells. It's like, that's the only thing our lab does. The only thing our lab does is Wharton's. They go, no, it doesn't. And I'm like, you're talking to the guy who's part of the lab.
I think a 3-letter government agency found out how well they work, and then Big Pharma decided they didn't want that out there. So there was a pretty good advertising campaign, and it's been traced back to that government agency more than once, that said they were illegal and they're dangerous and they cause tumors. And they went back, 50, 70 years in the research and brought out some of the things they were learning from other types of stem cells that didn't work. And they really polluted the minds of the public with that. I've had stem cells a number of times for some really chronic issues, including Lyme disease. And every single time there is a massively noticeable difference.
Yeah.
And when you put the stem cells into an already highly, ideally charged environment in the body, they work better, quicker, more completely, and you can feel it.
Another thing from my previous novice experience with PEMF, there's a lot with the brain, obviously, and the functional neurology of chiropractic. There are so many great brain practitioners. Brain-based practices are a big deal. That's way too much detail for this specific podcast. We're going to have a specific one just on that. But even Pulsed Electromagnetic Field in brain in PubMed, there's 605 results. And that was another thing, right? With Dr. Mark Funderlich, that's why we all hang out with people smarter than us and we learn from their experiences. I mean, he does a lot with itty bitty babies, as you know. Like, he doesn't not only great at working on adults, but he's kind of a pediatric genius a little bit in neurodevelopment of youth. And I was even kind of blown away, like taking little babies and with this PEMF, it's like whether it's 1 day old or away you go, because he works on a lot of sick little babies. And I was like, really? He goes, oh yeah. Just like matter of fact, like, yeah, what do you mean you
Yeah.
don't know this? And
He's a
so,
different kind of genius. That's for sure.
yeah, but also just to see that the safety and effectiveness that he has had for a period of time, and it is just not new, and how he's teaching it and going on, that was just, it was impressive.
So real briefly, if I may, the way that Mark and I became friends was he came out to Idaho where I live to work with some doctors out here on a program he was developing, and nobody really had anywhere for him to stay. And my wife and I, our kids are grown and gone. We had a spare room, so I said he's welcome to stay with us, and he did. And we got to know him for about 5.5 weeks, and he knew about the machine. We talked a lot about it, and it was kind of funny because he'd look at me a little funny when I'd tell him stories that were absolutely true, and he didn't want to try the machine because he wanted to do basically a study on it, and he didn't want to pollute the environment by trying it a few times and then saying, well, where am I really coming from?
Yeah.
And so it might muddy the results. So he had to go home kind of quick for an emergency. His son was having some issues. I want to say he was 10 months old. I'm sure Mark would correct me. But his son, Cedric, was having some issues with his eustachian tubes, and the doctors had said there was a muscle that didn't develop properly. And so he was having issues, and he had quit talking. And they were really alarmed, and doctors wanted to do all these different invasive things like surgery, and they said no. And when he told me, he was panicked, and he was back at home on the East Coast, and I said, okay. And I got off the phone. I said to my wife, we're going to send Mark a machine to help his child. And he called me when he got the machine. He said, what is this? I didn't buy this. What are you doing? I said, just use it to help your son. And he said, okay, I'll think about it. I might just send it back to you. And Mark's pretty skeptical. Very skeptical. He's a real proof kind of guy. And so he put the machine on his son, and in 3 days, and we'd have to find out, I think he did 20 minutes a day on very low power. 3 days later, his son said the cat's name when it walked through the kitchen, and he was being fed. And he called me up and he said, my son just spoke, and he was kind of choked up. He said, we don't want to do these surgeries. We don't want to do all the stuff that they're recommending. He said, and your machine obviously made the difference that he's talking. So he can hear well enough that now, again, he started to verbalize. His daughter was born, and he said she was 45 minutes or an hour old, and he put her on the machine on low. And I said, why would you do that? He said, why not? It's not going to hurt her. It's helped me, my wife, and my son so much. Why not? And like you said, he's a pediatric genius. So anyway, that was that little story. And then at one point, he was such a believer. He called me and he said, I'd like to help you. Can I get a title at your company? And I said, I'll make you president. I want you to do what you can. And so it's been a great thing.
Yeah, he is. He's got a great big brain, but his also real life experience gives him so much beyond academia to where he's such a great three-dimensional thinker. And he's going to be rewriting textbooks his whole career. So yeah, it's great to see it. So let's jump in a little bit. You briefly talked about some of these things. We don't have to go super deep dive, but the fact, so people know, because not only we help a lot of people with these things, but if you live a cool enough life, I always tell people you won't be put in the grave healthy. Right. So some of the things we would want everybody to avoid: Lyme's disease. I'm super glad I don't have it, but it's not as rare as what people think. And especially if you live in the Northeast, it's almost like there's two different people in the Northeast. You either have Lyme's disease or you will have Lyme's disease. It is growing. So why don't you spend at least, 5 minutes, but we're not going to do an hour, which we could on just the fight and the details you had with Lyme's. But a lot of people listening out there, I know recently we have a shared case Lyme experience, and that was great for me experiencing it with ERT with this person that came from you. But go ahead, David.
So I had health problems all my life. I was a very athletic kid. I was always underweight, really skinny, always about 1 or 2 years behind on the growth chart. And that was a unique thing growing up. There were very few kids who were like that. Most kids were robust and healthy because that was back before modern medical had polluted every human on the earth. So never could figure it out. At times I would get super sick and couldn't function. I'd have to miss 1 or 2 weeks of school. And, if strep throat or something blew through town, I would get it. And it just was a bummer. My wife had gotten Lyme disease when she was over her grandpa's cabin in the mountains of Oregon and got bitten. And so she they never figured out what it was with her either. She just kept struggling. You know, we were both diagnosed with everything under the sun, fibromyalgia.
How old was your wife when she got it?
She was 5.
Right. That's what I wanted people to know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I got it in vitro. Turned out my sister has a lot of the exact same health problems I had. And once you understand Lyme well enough, those are right on the chart. Like, oh, okay, well, I see what's going on. And my mom had similar symptoms. Thyroid issues and things like that are very common with Lyme. And so I, for years, tried to figure out what was going on with my body. When I hit puberty, it was less. All the hormones really helped me stay strong and healthy, but I was behind again on the growth charts. And I was a very lightweight guy, very skinny, 5'10". And eventually, I started powerlifting, and I think everything I was doing, everything I was taking helped me. And I grew my final growth between age 22 and a half and 25, and I got a lot bigger. Still 5'10", but I put on a lot of weight and muscle. I got a lot stronger. My brain worked a lot better. Everything was great. And then I started to have problems again. Had 2 children and was raising them and working 2 jobs and had my own business and a lot of stress. And stress really knocks down people who are suffering from L-form bacteria like Lyme, Zika, West Nile, that kind of thing. So I had been all over, and I had read on the internet, and I lived a mountain bike, so I would ride up the mountains that are here in my valley, and thousands of feet on a mountain bike, and down trails and down the other side. And we did this big 20-something mile loop, and I just do that in an afternoon, and it was great. I loved it. And all of a sudden, my body just quit working, and I struggled. I couldn't function, couldn't leave the house. I had constant bowel issues, dysentery, couldn't figure out what was going on. And when I was reading on the internet, it just was line by line. It was Lyme. I probably had 95% of the symptoms and whatnot. So pretty sure that's what it was. Went to a bunch of different doctors. They did all kinds of different tests that I now know are worthless because they're so highly inaccurate. And so they just told me, I did the Western blot test, which is useless. That test, some doctors will say, I've heard this and read it, that if you test the person within 21 days of infection, and you've got about a 12% accuracy rate on that test. So unfortunately, a lot of people go undiagnosed, and I was one of them. So was my wife. And again, told we had all these problems. I went to a family doctor, and I was having issues, and he said, man, we did a blood test. He said, your organs are shutting down. My kidneys, my liver and stuff were not functioning right. I was having vision problems. I was weak. I was tired. I was beat up. And I said, you know, what is causing all this? And he said, I'm going to figure it out. And I saw him over time. And a year later, roughly, I sat down and I said, hey, buddy, what? And he was a personal friend. And I said, what is causing all these problems? I mean, he says, I have no idea, but you got about a year to live. I was 30. So that was alarming. And I realized that I had to be my own advocate. So I started doing everything I could. And at one point, I was so ill, I could stay awake for about 2 hours. Then I'd have to sleep for 5 or 6, 2 hours, 5 or 6. And my wife supported the family, God bless her. And she's a soldier. And she was ill too, just not as sick as I was. So ended up finding a functional medicine doc, James Ware, who you happen to know. And his wife did the dark field microscopy test on myself, and about a week later on my wife. And we both had very severe cases of Lyme that come along with the co-infections, Babesia, Bartonella, and so on. And it was bad. And as a matter of fact, Pam kept saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, when she looked at Tracy's blood. And Tracy had to go to the bathroom every 7 to 10 minutes. She had urgent bladder all the time. And she was gone. She walked out of the room to go to the bathroom. And I said to Pam, we're done messing around. You're going to tell me what's going on. And she said, well, we've seen one other case this bad. And I said, okay, what does that mean? She said, well, that lady passed away 3 weeks later. So I said, okay, this is urgent. My wife walked back in the room, and I said, so you have the second worst case of Lyme they've ever seen, or equal to the first worst. I said, this is urgent. We have to do some stuff. So we started every therapy we could find, and obviously ran out of money quickly because it's very expensive. And we just started doing everything we could. We were borrowing money, running up credit cards, getting new credit cards. And we would both, she got better, but we would both kind of do this wave thing, and it was a real bummer. By the time we found out about the Lyme, I had neuropathy from the elbows down and the knees down, and I was 43, I think. And I look healthy, And people say to you all the time, well, you look fine. Well, Lyme doesn't make you look bad necessarily. And I didn't know that there were tests that they just look at you and tell you what's wrong with you. So we struggled with that, and it was a few years while we were struggling with it before we found the solution. And in that time, a friend of mine had cobbled together a PEMF based on Tesla's patent and had traveled across the country and stopped at my house for a place to stay and to borrow some money for gas. And he said, you got to try this. Now, I had 8.5 years earlier, I'd gone snow skiing with a friend of mine, and I'd forgotten that I was older and wasn't 16 anymore when I used to ski race. And I was doing about 45, 50 miles an hour on the backside of our local mountain, Bogus Basin. And I guess I hooked an edge on the ice. And I don't remember anything except when I woke up, my entire shoulder was just on fire. And I had that buddy that we all had, all us guys back in high school, that says, just walk it off, you're being a wuss, you know? So I skied 2 more runs until the pain was absolutely blinding. And I said, I got to go. I couldn't use my arm for anything. My shoulder was so painful. And 8.5 years later, I went to the surgeons. I went to the physical therapists. Physical therapy, God bless them for trying, it made it worse. It just inflamed it more. But I ended up with about 30% range of motion, maybe less than that. And really, I could bend my elbow, but I could not lift my elbow forward to the side or back more than just a couple inches. And so my wife's 5'1", and I'm 5'10". I'm not super tall, but then everything she needs out of the cabinets, it's on anything but the bottom shelf. I only have one arm to do it with. And it was kind of like I'd had my arm chopped off, only it was worse because if I bumped it wrong or I did, say, move it in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping, I would wake up in a ton of pain. So my friend brought his version by, and he said, let's put this on you. He put it on me for a few minutes, and I didn't really notice anything. I think it was 20 minutes. I went to the bathroom, and I had to blow my nose. When I blew my nose so hard, I'd never blown my nose that hard, and I've always had a little bit of breathing issues, kind of like asthma, and especially exercise-induced. So I was able to take a completely full breath, and I thought that's really weird. And I knew if I huffed and puffed, I would have breathing problems. I stood there breathing, and I felt like I was breathing deeper than ever. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna huff and puff and see if I can cause some breathing issues. And I was able to breathe so deeply and so well, I couldn't believe it. But this guy has Asperger's. And some of the people with Asperger's, if you get them excited, they will talk to you for 12 hours. And he had done that in the past and kept me up until 7 or 8 in the morning. So when I walked back in the other room, my wife was using it, and she says, oh my gosh, this is wonderful, and I love it. I feel so much better. This is great. And I hadn't experienced that, but I think women are a lot more in touch with their bodies and what's functioning in it, and men kind of just trudge through a lot of times. And so I sat down, and she finished, and he said, don't you have a bad shoulder? And I said, yeah. And he said, let's try it on your shoulder. And my shoulder was such a bummer and such a problem that I didn't care what you did to me. If it would solve it, I didn't care. Hit me with a sledgehammer. We put it on my shoulder, and 20 minutes later, I stood up, and it took me a bit of time because I had more range of motion, but I didn't want to exceed the comfortable range of motion and experience that pain because it was really excruciating. And it took about 2.5 minutes, and I was windmilling my arm with no pain whatsoever. There was a click and a pop, but it wasn't painful. I couldn't believe that in 20 minutes, what none of the surgeons said, it's the kind of rotator cuff tear where if we do surgery, it'll only get worse. Lyme didn't help because I healed very slowly. And so I couldn't believe it. I literally started crying. I felt like I had my life back. I have 2 arms instead of 1. And it did limit me from doing a lot of things. I couldn't bear much weight with the left arm, that kind of stuff. And so my wife started crying. My friends just staring at us like we're a couple of goofballs. And I said, man, I want to build these and help people. He said, I just built it for fun. He had married a lady from Brazil. They moved to Brazil. He was in the country occasionally, and now he lives there permanently. But I said, well, I'm going to build these. And we sat down, and I got him to give me all the information, and I built it. And it was a very poor excuse, I felt, for it worked, but I didn't think it was what it should be. So we spent years innovating, changing, studying, and we ended up with what we have now. With my neuropathy, I would wake up sometimes in the morning, and the sciatic nerve pain that would go down my right leg was so bad I couldn't stand. But my feet were freezing, my hands were freezing. I started using it, and I realized Our neuropathy protocol is different than anyone else's, and it works massively. A lot of people will get massive results in the first 20 or 30-minute session, even 15 minutes. And we've helped a ton of people, and our doctors are helping people everywhere with neuropathy. But my hands and feet were the same temperature as any other part of my body after just a few sessions on the machine. And the neuropathy went away. I was able to bend and twist and walk and stand and reach for things up high. And the Lyme symptoms sort of started to go down. I got a lot of strength back, that kind of stuff. And then we eventually found out about a clinic that did stem cells for Lyme that was out of the country. And we went and did that. And we got better so quick, it was unbelievable. And we love the people at that clinic, and we still go there at least every 6 months if we can. And so between stem cells and PEMF, our machine specifically, the ERT, we were able to heal pretty much completely. And then in 2019, we returned home from delivering some machines to doctors and going to the Mexico clinic. And we did not realize that due to the construction behind our house, there had developed a crack in one of the pipes, and it was leaking in the wall and growing mold. So
I have that here somewhere. So before we get to that, it's on one of these slides. So we'll get to it. You already kind of talked about this, but since the slide's here, this is Tracy with her dirt bike accident in 2018. So, once again, we kind of talked about bone healing. Some people might think, oh, I can't do something because I have a broken arm. It's like, no. This is one of those things you want to do it as soon as you can get to a practitioner that has one. Or again, if you, whatever, I can't encourage people enough to pursue this, even when it's in your acute situation. And then even if you have access to these, I mean, just like with laser therapy, like we highly recommend people get treated before the surgery. This is the same type of thing. If you could get this done prior to surgery, there's a level of healing in the acute phase that is so profound.
I don't think people are going to believe this story. I have the x-rays to prove it. And we did that on purpose because we told it a few times and people just kind of went, no way. So 2018, let's see. So that was 6 years ago. So Tracy was 44. We were feeling healthy, doing better. We were over the Lyme. We were wanting to live again because we missed a lot of life just feeling crummy and tired. And so she said, I want to learn to ride motorcycles. And she'd ridden them a little bit when she was a kid, but never really done much. And so she took a motorcycle class and I taught her some things. And eventually she said, let's buy them and go riding. So we bought a couple of motorcycles and we went riding, and she was great. She was still learning, but she was doing a great job. She picked it up very quick. And you can see her in her favorite motocross outfit there. And she finally said to me, I want to quit going to where it's flat in the desert areas out here, and I want to go up to the mountains. And it was spring. And I said, okay. I don't know where we live in Idaho. I don't know where there's not snow, but we'll drive up in the mountains and we'll see. So we got up to one of the spots, Pilot's Peak above Idaho City. And there was a little bit of snow here and there, but the road was the dirt road that goes up was clear, and it's a beautiful area to ride. So we hopped on our motorcycles and we rode up the road, and we didn't get very far, and there was a big snowfield, probably about 250, 300 feet long, and Tracy was having trouble getting across it, so I took her motorcycle and walked it across it for her, and then hopped on mine and kind of got across it. It was slushy and slippery and icy in some places, even though it was a warm day. And so we rode up the mountain, and I said, it's either going to get better or worse, but when we get to the south side where the sun will hit it, the snow will be gone. We went up there, and there was, because we were gaining altitude, I think there was a lot more snow. So we rode across a number of snowfields until we saw a big drift up ahead and said, we'll just turn around and go back. So I said, if you need, I'll take your motorcycle across the snowfield. She said, I think I got it after riding across the few that we did. I think I got it. And I think she just was enjoying herself and kind of lost track of reality. And we came to that big snowfield. She went across it at 35 miles an hour. And I've been riding all my life. And I was doing 10 miles an hour, maybe, knowing that I'm probably going to have the motorcycle slide out from underneath me. And she flew past me. And my first reaction was, oh, no. And then she was almost across it, and I thought, wow, maybe I'm the one who doesn't know how to ride. And the motorcycle just disappeared out from underneath her, and she went Superman across the slush onto ice that was wet and then into the mud. And it was so fast and so violent that when she hit the mud, it ripped her right arm back. And I thought she had a soft tissue injury, and I told her she was in a lot of pain. And my wife really almost never cries from pain, and she was shedding tears. So I knew it was serious. I thought she'd torn, rotator cuffs, some of that kind of stuff. And we ran her to a place called DOC that we have out here, Direct Orthopedic Care. And it was Cinco de Mayo, 2018. And we walked in, and I said, she's hurt her arm, motorcycle wreck. We think it's soft tissue. And the doctor took her back, got her an x-ray. Doctor came in the room a few minutes later, and she says, you broke your arm. And I said, really? She said, yeah. So the ball of the humerus here, two-thirds of the way out, there was a 2-millimeter gap, and the cap was missing. It was out there 2 millimeters. And so I shouldn't say missing, but it had moved 2 millimeters away. And I said, oh, geez. So they put her in an immobilizer, or a sling kind of thing, which you can see here. And then we went straight down to get an immobilizer. And they wanted us to check back a week later. And we were leaving for a conference in California for 2 weeks. So we went in a couple of days before that. Tracy had used the ERT immediately to do away with the pain. And she was using it during the day, but she would sleep with it on the whole time at night on very low. Bones, when they heal, to be helped by PEMF, should be turned down very, very low. They don't need much energy to heal, and it's a process, so you don't want to overpower that. So she slept for 9 nights with the ERT on most of the night, probably between 6 and 8 hours. And we went in to get her checkup before we left town. And Dr. Craig Smith says, we'll get your x-ray and I'll tell you what's going on. And she noticed that her shoulder would fall out of the joint to the front if she didn't have the immobilizer just correct. And she said, what is that? And he said, well, that would be your meniscus, which goes over the shoulder and kind of keeps it in place. And he kind of described it like a small hot dog, and it goes from the front to the back and over the top. And he said, you've obviously torn that. He came back with his iPad that had the x-ray on it, and he said, and he's a no-nonsense kind of guy, orthopedic surgeon. And he said, so you never broke your shoulder. We were wrong. So that's great. It's just soft tissue. And I said, hang on. I've been riding motorcycles and stuff all my life. I've had over 100 broken bones. I said, a lot of them just fingers and stuff. But I said, it was definitely broken. And he looked at me and he said, hey, man, I'm a surgeon. And I said, I get that, and I'm not challenging you, but I saw the gap. 2 millimeters is obvious, even to a layman, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of x-rays due to my own injuries. I said, and then my kids and that kind of stuff. I said, so I know it was broken. And he wouldn't. I said, just look at the other x-ray. Do you have it? And he goes, yeah, I've got it. And I said, then look at the previous x-ray. He said, no, I don't need to. And he said, you see these lines in the bone on the x-ray? He turned the iPad around. He said, those are growth lines, and if you break it, you could be 80, and I can tell that you broke your shoulder, your arm, or whatever when you were 12, because it heals with different directions of lines, of growth lines. I said, I get it, but I'm telling you it was broken. We talked for 3.5 minutes, and I finally said, would you just please look at the previous x-ray? And he paged back, and his exclamation was something I won't repeat. And the girls at the front desk started laughing. And then he started paging back and forth somewhat frantically. And I think he was checking to see, was it Tracy? Was it her right shoulder? So on and so forth.
Yeah.
Get the x-rays mixed up. And he said, well, I can't explain it. Whatever. It's not broken now. But you've got this meniscus problem, and we're going to have to do surgery and put screws and all that stuff in it. And he's a surgeon. You know, they say if you're a nail, everything, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're a surgeon, everything looks like you need to do surgery. So, and I understand that surgery's been done for that, but I'd read some articles where they said it's better to just let it heal on its own in medical journals and stuff. So, and then some of the doctors we were friends with that had machines and stuff, they said, yeah, I don't know if I'd do that. So she had apparently a little bit of a connection on top, but in front and back, the meniscus was the labrum. Sorry, the labrum was apparently completely torn off and hanging on by threads at the top. So they said, we'll have to do surgery. You'll get an MRI when you come back in a couple weeks, and we'll plan that out. And we walked out, and my wife's tough, and she said, I'm not doing surgery. And I said, why? She said, because if I healed the bone in 9 nights, I can heal the labrum. I said, well, hang on. I'm not a doctor, and I don't know all the answers, but we know that bone heals differently than cartilage. I think everybody knows that. And so she said, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to try it. So we went to California for 2 weeks, came back. She did about 45 nights on the machine, all straight out. And at the end of that, she did not have any torn labrum. She had 90-something% range of motion. She had no pain. Her shoulder didn't pop out of joint. And she felt fine, and she quit wearing the immobilizer and was doing a lot better. So we never went back, and we never did any of that stuff.
No, I love hearing those things, especially that factor that your machine can be turned down so low that you keep it on, just like you said, at night.
Yeah.
And that's a really neat function
Yeah.
that it does that.
Yeah.
So
So
great.
she was healed, and we went to Dr. James Ware because of her limited range of motion. And in one session with his brilliance, she had 100% range of motion, and she was totally fine. Her shoulder's never given her a single problem since.
Yeah, that's an awesome experience going to Dr. Pam and Dr. Jim Ware's clinic there. They got some skills, that's for sure.
Yeah, there was.
All right, before I interrupted you, like I said, I wanted to stay on that last one, but then here's mold here that we're at here.
So we found out there was mold in the house. It took about, we think it was growing. Now the pipe was cracked from when they built the house. They used the wrong kind of clamp on a PVC piece of tubing, and it was actually the HVAC drain line, which I had never realized. I mean, I'd see them dripping on the outside of the house. That's how we do it here in Idaho. I know in other places they put them in drains and whatever, but I'd seen it dripping. I didn't think anything of it. Whether you're producing heat or air conditioning, those things are pumping like a garden hose turned up halfway. It's a lot of water. And so it was cracked, I think, when they built the house. And then when they started doing, we had a backyard, and right at the fence, it wasn't a giant backyard, probably 40 feet, right at the backyard fence, they were running an industrial gigantic compactor and belly scrapers up and down the fence, carving out what had been farmland to make it into a giant development for shopping center and stuff. And there were times they'd drive that compactor by and it vibrates, and pictures would fall off the wall, and we couldn't put anything fragile close to the edge of a counter because it would vibrate off. And I think that's when the pipe from being cracked just literally fell and then just started pouring water underneath this master tub. And there's a bunch of stories behind that. But we found out about 9 months later, we had a fungal growth in the grout of the tile on the floor in the bathroom. And we're super clean people. We don't let water sit on the floor. We have mats everywhere and towels. And if water does end up on the floor, we clean it up. And I was really curious how in the world that would happen. And we were leasing the home. I had the property manager come out. She looked at it and she said, "Oh, I'll have somebody come out and clean the whole bathroom." 6 days later, we had a bigger fungal growth that grew. These grew overnight, which was odd. I'd never seen that. And it was 2 feet further away from any water source. So called her again. They had people come out. They tore the house apart and found out they had a guy crawling underneath the house, and he came up, and he had a lot of really unhealthy habits. You could tell by the way he smelled and stuff. And he said, "There's a lot of mold down there." And he looked frightened, and he was a really tough looking dude. So we had a 15-foot by 15-foot square area covered in 1 to 2 inches of solid black mold. They took samples all over, found out that the air in the bathroom had 1 million spores per cubic meter. We had Chaetomium, Stachybotrys, and Aspergillus mold, all three of which are known to kill people. Stachybotrys is super common for killing people because if you get sheetrock wet, it's already got the Stachybotrys in it and it starts to grow. And so we had Chaetomium, I guess, is the most toxic. So we had all these health problems, and we always come back from the clinic in Mexico and just feel better after the stem cells. And we were tired, and then skin problems started to show up, and skin would be sore. My nose was peeling all the time. And I thought, was I out in the sun? Did I burn my nose? And we couldn't figure it out. Well, when we found out it was mold, I didn't even know. I was so dumb at the time. I thought there were toxic molds and non-toxic molds, just like there are mushrooms you can eat and mushrooms that will kill you if you eat them. I figured there was a range. Well, there's not a range. All mold is toxic. And I hired an industrial hygienist to survey the house. And anyway, we started our journey of healing, but we would have all kinds of issues, like you feel like somebody just pounded a nail through your hand. Your fingers would hurt and then tingle and then feel like they were on fire, and just all kinds of nerve issues. And ERT would calm that so that it was tolerable. It was nerve toxins because mold spores are a neurotoxin. They affect your nerves. And so we had thinking problems, vision problems, a lot of brain fog, that kind of stuff. And the ERT would make it so we could function. But because we were full of that toxin and it was all over in our bodies in massive amounts, we took a mold toxicity test, and our results were phenomenally high, and it scared the docs. And mold is it's a weird thing to deal with, and no two people react exactly the same. But we have been on a journey since that, and We have learned a lot, and we're getting healthier, and we are far better than we used to be, but we want to be back to complete and full health. And there are certain things the docs will have you take depending on which mold doc you go to, and there's not a lot of mold specialists out there, but we found a couple good ones. And some of the supplements you take are meant to take toxins out of the brain and that kind of stuff, and they work. But if you run ERT on your skull right after you take that supplement for 20 minutes on low, you get a magnified result, and it's really helped us to recover. Yeah. So we're functional today. We still got a ways to go. We're probably 75%, maybe 80% better. Those toxins and the molds and stuff are tough to get out of the body, but we've learned a lot, and we're progressing. We got now we have a really great physician that's really helping us. And in fact, he has a machine. That's the clinic I was at yesterday, doing work on one of his patients' wives who has some issues. But so that was kind of our mold story. We've got a ways to go, but I have no doubt that at one time I wondered if we'd be alive in a few years. Now I know we're going to be alive. We're fine. We just still deal with a few issues, and we're just working on getting all of that mold out of the body. And we've seen our symptoms go down drastically, which the mold toxicity symptoms are horrible, and they're the worst. And
mold is so common. Coast to coast, of course, in the Southeast where our humidity is pretty high, of course, you're going to have even more. But what thing I have found, and this has been for quite a while already, like people are very, very aware, even though there might not be that many mold experts of treating. You can find information, people like you aren't uncommon, but I'm actually pretty impressed the amount of people that you don't have to wait very long, and they do go towards mold. They're like, we need to get a specialist in here. We need to check your house for mold. And the people that do that, they're really smart. Like, it's been around long enough that there's so many cases. It's very well recognized of the dangers of mold. There's still controversies out there, which I think are just totally insane. Like some of the things with statins and cholesterol and heart disease and what causes cancer and what causes this. It's like, we know what causes those things. You just refuse to tell the truth or refuse to do it. But mold, I'm incredibly impressed with, even as a little kid, I'd say mold wasn't highly recognized. It was kind of like, almost like Lyme's is now, even though when you're in my world, we don't wait for people to suffer with incurable diseases. Like, it wouldn't take us very long to find out that somebody has Lyme's, because it's like, okay, if it's not this, if it's not this, it's not this. But that's still not the general rules out there across the country. Mold, my experience has been not just dealing with the intelligent clinicians that you and I know, that there's a lot of people that are really aware, and they don't wait too long to check for mold, but then you have to do something about it. So this is going to be a great podcast helping people, just what the ERT does. But obviously, when people are on your ERT treatments, you're not treating any diseases, but you have enough experience that you can refer people to where they're going to get answers. So thanks for sharing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think the best resource of all, Pam McDougall, who trains doctors on the cancer diet and a bunch of other stuff, brilliant lady. She's the one that was almost 70 and broke her arm, and it healed in 4 weeks. She recommended a book by Dr. Neil Nathan. I want every practitioner to know about this. This book has been the single best thing for us to understand how to get over this, because everybody reacts differently. Some therapies work on one person and not on another. My wife and I can't do the exact same therapies. Her body is tougher than mine, and she heals quicker, and she can tolerate more of the toxicity and some of these therapies that pull it out of you. But the book by Dr. Neil Nathan is called Toxic. It's not an expensive book. It's available on Amazon. If you've got mold, you have to get that book. It's I can't say enough about it. It educated us to the point where we became our own advocates, and now we're not. Some of these therapies will knock you back, so bad because they release too many toxins. That book explains how to handle things, be your own advocate, and then you find a good doc, and you're on your way.
Great. Thanks for that. Because those little pearls, those are things that change people's lives. It starts with education, and then you put it into application.
That book saved our lives, literally.
Fantastic. All right. This slide, you kind of made reference to this as well. But this is where you're doing some construction project. For those of you that can see this picture, this is quite a bruise he has on his left shoulder, but that's not the only bruise he has.
You can't see it all. It goes down my arm.
Oh, so this is a very unfortunate situation, but go through this again. And I just want to make sure we're courteous of your time, so I don't have a hard stop here. But we got a little ways to go yet, but still don't discount what we're going to talk about here either.
I can go through it pretty quick. So I had an RV garage on a house, and I wanted to have storage up above. I didn't have a tall RV, so I didn't need the height. And I talked to a buddy of mine who wanted one of my machines. He's a personal friend, and he actually sells this orange racking. You can see it's blue and orange. And he lives out of town, and really close friend, guy I really love and respect. And he was having some health problems, and I started giving him some advice, and he started going to the right doctors, and he started getting better. But he was having a lot of cognition and brain fog issues. And so he came up, shipped a bunch of the stuff to me, and we started putting it together. Originally, he was going to have a crew come up, and for some reason, they weren't able to make it. So we're putting this pallet racking together in my garage, and we're decking it with 1 1/8 tongue and groove plywood, which is really heavy. A 4x8 foot sheet of that stuff weighs a ton. So we were putting it together, and we were decking it, and he said he would square up the uprights so that the beam was even, and I could put the wood down. And my neighbor was helping, and his name's Mark also, and he kept saying, "Be careful, you're being too cavalier about this." I said, it doesn't matter if I fall off this deal. I'm only 10, 11 feet high. I said, I land on my feet all the time. And that was true until this time. And so the little arrogance there that got me bit. And that, by the way, in this picture at the top, the thing down on the bottom left, I was like, what kind of rat is that? That's my skull showing the staples that were put in my skull to put the flesh back together. So I put a piece of plywood down. He said, it's all squared up from what I can tell with my measurements. I checked. I said, yep, I was up top. So I put the plywood down, and I very carefully went out and looked at it. I said, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Don't touch a thing. And he had some kind of a mental glitch and took his sledgehammer while I was standing on it. I stood up and turned around to walk back to get my gun, my screw gun and that kind of stuff, and start screwing it in. And he went over and hit the other upright. And so the orange beam shifted, and the plywood I was on fell. And it was a split-second thing, but I realized that if I surfed it to the floor, which would have been fine, it was only 10, 11 feet down, it would have hit him and probably blown him through the wall. And in a moment, I just realized it would be so bad it would either really severely damage him or kill him. So I leaped out for this orange beam you can see, and it was 102 degrees that day, which is unusually warm for here, but I was sweating like mad. And I dove as I was falling. I caught that beam. I remember that. And then I was Superman. So then when my feet swung around, I don't know what happened. That memory's gone. But at some point, I knocked the whole thing over. I flipped off of it and hit my head on the pavement. And I had a 5-foot diameter puddle of blood on the floor where I landed. The skull bleeds a lot. And my wife had gone to get food. And he said I laid there. He picked me up and pulled me onto his lap and was talking to me and slapped me in the face. And I wasn't breathing. I didn't breathe for over 2 minutes. So pretty bad deal. They immediately called an ambulance, and he was talking to me, and I guess right around the 2.5 minute mark, I took my first breath, and I don't remember any of this, and I don't remember the paramedics picking me up, none of that stuff. I remember being in the ambulance and my neighbor's wife telling the paramedics they couldn't leave. My wife was almost back home, and that if they left with me before she got home, my wife would lose her mind. And so my wife showed up, and I talked to her, and she said, I'm going with you. And it was during COVID, so they wouldn't let her come. They drove me about 23 miles to a hospital. And so I had my wife grab my phone. I was cognizant enough for that. And she finally gave up on going in the ambulance. They said she wouldn't be allowed to go in the hospital, or she'd be arrested and whatnot. So she gave up, and they took me to the hospital. And this picture, I knew my wife was stressing out. And so I took funny pictures of my face in the neck brace and everything, just to show her I've got a sense of humor. I'm still alive, still have the same personality. I haven't lost my mind. And I was texting her, and had this wonderful lady doctor in the ER that was incredible. They said I had a traumatic brain injury. I had a broken right arm. They didn't check anything else other than my skull, and they could tell my arm was broken. I had a broken wrist, and right below it a broken arm. So I had 2 fractures or breaks right there. It was painful, but not unbearable. But I had a real headache that was incredible. And they put a number, I don't remember how many staples in my scalp. I had not only split my scalp, but split it another place. So there was a Y. And they put a bunch of staples in and disinfected me and said, now you're going to go down to the downtown hospital. This one's out in the country where I live. And you're going to stay for few days or a week. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm self-employed, and that would be an enormous bill. And I've had brain bleeds before, and I know what they're like, and this one's not a big deal. And she begged me not to get up and leave. And I said, I'm gonna. And she said, hang on, let me call the brain surgeon, or whoever it was. Some guy had to do a lot with the brain at the main hospital, and I guess he was reading my MRI. And he said, well, it's a bleed. It's not a terrible bleed. He does have a TBI, traumatic brain injury, but as long as he's not on blood thinners, I think he'll be okay, but he can't strain. He can't lift anything heavy. Well, I was beat up enough. I wasn't going to lift anything bigger than a glass of water. So she helped me, and she talked to me. She went and talked to the surgeon got him on the phone down at the main hospital, and they let me go home. And when I got home, I realized I had a broken kneecap. I had broken fingers. I had broken toes. Things started to swell up once I got in the recliner, which I lived in for several weeks. But I had a wicked headache, and it was blindingly painful. So my wife was waiting on me hand and foot, and she said, do you want to use the ERT? And I said, absolutely. Put it on my head, and we turned it on low. And in 15 minutes, I had no headache. And I've had 13 concussions, so I know what they feel like. I raced motocross and did all kinds of extreme sports and rock climbed and played football. And so I've had a lot of injuries. So put on my head, pain went away. Then I put on my wrist, and remember, my wife had used it on her shoulder and to heal the broken shoulder, which was a huge bone break. I mean, that's a massive area. And I put it on my wrist, and I could feel the electricity like jumping, and the coil's gone over the clothes, but I could feel like electricity jumping the gap, and it almost was ticky, ticky, tick like a sewing machine in my mind. And I looked at my wife and I said, it's not painful. It's not the most pleasant thing, but it's not painful. It's just a little irritating. And I said to my wife, is this what your shoulder felt like? And she said, oh yeah. And she's way tougher than I'll ever be. So she waited on me hand and foot, and I was on my feet. Just like that day, I could take myself to the bathroom. I could get a glass of water. And I put those coils on my wrist, and I ran them for, I did it probably 4 or 5 hours a day on low for about 6 days. And they wanted to put a cast on. I wouldn't let them. They put a splint on. And immediately when I got home, I took the splint and undid the ace bandage. And I would lay my arm in the splint on the arm of the chair. But I would do a little bit of motion with my wrist and real gentle. And I knew from previous breaks and stuff, if I let it be immobilized, it would take forever to get the mobility back. That's probably not true if I'd use the ERT, but I didn't want to get to where it was stiff, and that can take a long time to work out. So I would ERT it, and then I would flex it around, and in 7 days there was no more break, and I felt fine. I can tell if the bones are breaking. It hurt, but the wrist and the arm were broken right there. And 7 days I was better. We used it on my bruises. They went away very quickly because it causes a lot more blood flow in those areas and brings healing factors. And we took that picture of the bruise on my shoulder I think it was 2 days after I got home from the hospital. It was my first shower. And so I healed up real quick, got better. I used it on my head for a long time, even after the headaches were gone. And they recurred for probably 2 or 3 days. And then I just started using it on my head because it felt good, and I don't know how to explain that. It just provided a pleasant sensation. Brain fog went away. A whole bunch of the issues I'd had from the mold just went away, and I was functioning way better. So then my wife started duplicating that and using it on her head, and we just had getting hurt was kind of a blessing because we were able to get x-rays and see how quickly things healed. We were able to, so we could prove that. We were able to understand some things that we'd never experimented with, like putting on the brain for short periods of time, even 20, 30 minutes, and running it on very low. We had doctors call us and say that their patients that had migraines, when they did the headache protocol, which is 2 coils on top, 2 in back, run on very low for 10 minutes, that their patients who'd had lifelong chronic migraines weren't getting, and these people that Dr. Lou Arendt told me about, it was mostly ladies, they were having migraines every month or every 3 weeks kind of thing. And they were ocular, to where they'd have to close themselves up in a dark room in a closet, wrap up in a blanket, and just suffer for 3 days. And he said his most chronic sufferer, I think she came 5 times, and she never, and Lou just passed away a year ago, so I knew him for 14 plus years, and he never told me her migraines ever came back. And I've had a lot of our practitioners call us and say, did you know that this really affects migraines in a positive way, and these patients aren't suffering anymore. So it's an across the board thing, and helped us a ton. And then we were able to use some of my knowledge from healing myself to extend that to our practitioners, and it's just been a wonderful thing. So terrible accident. My wife still doesn't like to talk about it or hear about it because it really stressed her out. She was afraid I was going to die, and I did have a massive gash, and you could see my skull, and there was
that's a big one. That's a legit gash.
There was a humongous amount of blood on the floor. I mean, it was literally a 5-foot circle, and I've got pictures. And and she just had to wait at home until I called her. I told the doctor I was leaving. I walked out and sat on the bench, called my wife, and said, "Come get me." She said, "You're out?" I said, "Yeah, just come get me." I sat on the bench for almost 40 minutes because our house is quite a ways from there, and there's traffic. And I healed completely. I mean, I still got a scar on my head and all that, but I functioned just fine. If not, maybe I needed a big head impact because I think I functioned better than I did before.
Yeah. I would put some extra post therapy into it to get you going.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of great research out there. A lot of great experience from you, David. These are some of the things, right when I first got it. I kind of talked because so much of what we do in our places, we want activity. So would we do aspects? We have unattended stations, but what we generally do, we do a whole 3D brain body fit exam on people. We find their weak links. We find certain stretches strengthening, as well as the hopeful ninja adjustments I deliver to people, the nutritional things. But this has been so fantastic because before we had unattended stations, active stations as much as possible. We have a lot of lasers, so lasers were very useful. But again, this works on a different mechanism, still at that deep cellular level. In the one picture you see there, where this is fairly static, we commonly still would have people do grip training and dexterity balls, right when they're in this neck decompression device. But we've got the ERT on him, and you can see that's actually draped around his shoulders. We're stacking it with laser therapy at that time, but obviously this works all by itself. So one of the things when I first got it, and the coil is fantastic, super functional, whether you're face up, face down, lying seated. But I was always kind of like, hey, I want to use this on our stations, to where we have people, they're squatting, they're deadlifting, they're doing any exercise within reason you can think of. And so this has been so fantastic. We created what's known as activation straps. If you see this, you see it in the picture. Obviously, those of you who are going to refer to the website later, they're on the website, whether you go to PerformancePractic.com, specifically ERT has an entire section just for itself. Obviously, we're going to give you the direct website and contact for David here. He has them on there too. So this has been great. These are very three-dimensional. Here's a picture where even if you have extremity problems, never underestimate putting the ERT coil on the spine. The spine connects to every single muscle in the body. It connects to every single organ in the body, the sympathetic, parasympathetic, whether you're looking at the meridian system, big game changer putting it on the spine. And now with these activation straps, it just takes seconds to put these things on, and it works so great. You could do so many movement applications. Here you see it's just on my arm. And if you were sitting in a chair, very easily, the coil will very effectively work. But in the next picture, as I show this, it's on my elbow, but we're doing grip training, we're doing dexterity balls while we're doing PEMF. And anytime you can put appropriate activity into the body while we're putting this very unique therapy, we're charging the cells. We're literally charging the cells of the body up, but it's also rhythms of the body. The body's very electrical. So we are dealing with one of the most foundational components of the body when we're using ERT, whether we're doing systematic benefits, symptomatic benefits. But I loved the machine before we came out with activation straps, and before, being an ex-powerlifter, we got wraps and straps for everything in bands. So we were doing that, and I'm like, hey, this works really good. We need to make something more attractive for future people. So great job of the manufacturing of these straps. Very durable. The wash, the Velcro is industrial A+. So this really made a whole game changer of here, where you can see how you can just use it passively on the knee. We're not using activation straps, but then you can see how it wraps that coil around the knee, any area of the body. That coil is so fantastic how it literally molds to the body, no matter big, small, whatever. The ERT coil is a great delivery system. And of course, this is going to help people tremendously. But here again, something super simple. Just use your chiropractic table. And I'm just sitting on a table to where my feet are flat on the table. And I just put a 10-pound weight under one foot, and it's on carpet, and it's a metal weight. So I can extend and curl my leg, my knee to 90 degrees, and then extend my leg out to 180. And I have the PEMF on my knee with the activation straps, totally relaxing for me. That current is just 100% going right into the knee, and just slow and steady motions. And just, there's literally thousands of things you can do. PEMF is so proven to do as a static therapy. My opinion, David's machine ERT works significantly better than anything I've tried on the past. But then when you can put activity to PEMF, and I'm not aware of really anybody that was doing that so much.
You are the first, without question.
Yeah, it just makes sense, So we have power racks in here. We do all sorts of things, and yeah, people are literally doing fairly high level intensities, and we're putting PEMF on them while they're deadlifting, while they're squatting, while they're doing kettlebell swings. They're just in a stationed area. Obviously, this is not Bluetooth. You do have a cord, so you got to position these things accordingly. But so many things. Here I am just doing a body weight squat here, but these activation straps and that coil, it moves with your body, and it is game changer in terms of how you can apply this into what we're doing. So those are some of the things. If you're interested in even learning more of this, so PerformancePractic TV, there's no substitute for doing these podcasts and getting information out to you. Of course, whether you're a clinician, PerformancePractic TV is kind of like Netflix for healers. There's a big section specifically for ERT in there. We're going to keep adding stuff, but it's really hands-on applications. We teach you a lot of 3D brain body fit exams in there. And then, of course, once you have that exam, you see the asymmetries. PEMF is one of the significant things that we do for whole body healing, as well as symptomatic applications of those things. So this just kind of gives you an idea. This is the small list of different chapters that are in there, but you can see all those ERT listings in there. There's a bunch, and there's going to be even more coming in the future. It just keeps growing and growing as we have time to put those things in there. Now, if there's anything else you want to share, David, otherwise, I'm just going to let you go through these closing slides, how people can contact you.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is that probably we have doctors of every kind, but chiropractors are our main guys. And I think they're doing a lot of the healing and helping people with stuff that isn't getting taken care of at other places. And there seems to be, in some areas, in some docs, they're treating people, but they want to treat other conditions. They want to enhance their practice, grow it, that kind of stuff. And so what the machine allows these guys to do is they're going to be able to treat neuropathy. They're going to be able to treat sprains and strains better than any hospital or doctor could. They're going to be able to treat neuropathy, strains and sprains, headaches, things they normally wouldn't be able to see patients for. So it helps them give more to their patients. They're already trusted and liked, and their patients see them on a regular basis. Now they can treat more things and help their patients in more areas, and it just ends up being a great thing for everybody. And one quick story, we have a guy at our local clinic, Health Spark, owned by Dr. Buddy Allen and Dr. Sean Stadelbauer. And Dr. Sean and Buddy love the machine. They actually have two of them. And they have a amputation patient that I want to get in front of and do a story with, a video story. He lost both of his legs in an accident when he was 19 working on the railroad. Some charges went off that weren't supposed to. And I had seen him one day using the machine. And I asked Dr. Allen, I said, hey, tell me about that. I want to know what's going on because we don't have any experience with amputees. He said, well, he has prosthetics, of course, so he can walk. And he said, he's a pretty good looking, heavy dude, well built. And I said, what happens? He said, well, he gets sore walking on these prosthetics. It just makes the stump sore. And he's never had any way to fix it. So he said, he's done all the other stuff, muscle rubs and ice and all that stuff. He said, few weeks ago, he said, we tried it on the first time. We did 20 minutes on each stump. And he said, that was a 3-day weekend. He said he came back in after the weekend, and he said, I was able to function fully doing wood shop stuff in my garage, doing my yard stuff, doing all kinds of stuff on my feet for many hours a day. I don't think I got an exact number of hours. And he said I had zero pain and I was super functional. He said it was so great to be able to do things and finish tasks rather than have to stop after a short amount of time and rest because of the pain. But he said I overdid it and I'm in a lot of pain. And they put him on the ERT again, and it did away with the pain. And again, he had the same kind of result. So I haven't asked in over a year how he's doing. And we just keep forgetting about it, but I've got to do a testimonial with that. So it's a lot more cases and a lot more you can do for the patients you're already seeing, which is a great thing to increase, what you're capable of and so on. And I want to make a point that I have 0 machines. We've sold, I don't know, somewhere over 300. I haven't counted in a long time. We have 0 machines that sit in a closet and gather dust. And I make a commitment to everybody that if you get the machine and it becomes something you're not using for some reason, I will do a phone call with you and your staff. I want to make sure you understand it. If need be, I'll put you on the phone with one of my great docs like you. And if you agree to that, and explain to them how to use it and what to do for their patients. And if that doesn't do it, I will fly out and train their staff in person. And if for any reason that doesn't do it, I'll take the machine back. I never want to have a machine gathering dust in that closet that so many doctors have that's so full of unused devices. And I've never taken a single machine back. Everybody loves them. I get calls all the time. Hey, I've got a new case. It's not mentioned in your literature. What do I do with this? And if I don't know, I'll get them on the phone with somebody like you or one of my great docs that's really advanced, and we get the patient helped out. So that's all. So my name is David Petroviak. I founded it. The machine's built by me. I have help. I have things machined, that kind of stuff. But the machine is built by me. I've tried to hire people to build it, and quality control is something I'm really uptight about. And I think there are people out there that can help me build it, but it's just been me because the quality control is such a big deal to me. And you reach me at on my phone number, 208-703-7326. I'm in Mountain Time in Idaho. My name's David, and my email is david@electro-regenerative.com, like you see on the screen. And to help Dr. Jerome out, we're offering the discount code of BBF250. That's basically a $250 credit. You can take it off the price of the machine, or you can get the activation straps, that kind of thing. So however you want to use it. Our website is, we've got several websites, but the one that my wife's been doing a lot of work with lately is www.ert-electroregenerative.com. We have social media. We have Instagram and YouTube and all that stuff. So if you want to see some of the patient and doctor testimonials, you can go to those places and look at all that. And that's it. And I'm happy to answer questions. We consider everybody that owns a machine part of our family, and I get calls sometimes at midnight or in the middle of the day saying, hey, I wanted to use this on my wife or this patient or whatever. How do I do it? Here's the issue. And we'll go over all the details, and we get great results, and we're happy about what we do. And it's a passion for us. We love helping people.
It is, and I'll give a testament to that, because how I found you was happy customers that you had already. They raved about you, the person. They raved about the machine. And I was like, okay, and without a doubt, it has not disappointed us. It's been a great experience for us, and all the different traditional methods that it's used, some of the activities that we've implemented with it. I've learned so much through you and your experience. So it has been a real positive. And I can't thank you enough for all you do, all you are doing. It's great going to be able to move forward with you. And, this is a big part of the Brain Body Fit family of how everything fits and integrates and works together. So as well as everybody listening, thanks to you, this all makes it happen, how we all offer what we know to help other people's. Hopefully this helps yourself as well. So David, thank you so much for being on the show today, and everybody out there, have a great, healthy day.
We appreciate you. Have a great day. Thanks, Jerome.
Thank you for listening to the Brain Body Fit podcast, where we are dedicated to helping doctors and clients integrate clinical evaluation and performance enhancement. Please like and share this episode with someone who wants to empower their own health and actively participate in the health revolution of the growing millions. Epic changes are real. Visit us at PerformancePractic.com, where you can explore premium selected products and services that we have used to change the lives of thousands in our clinic and seminars for decades. Follow us on our socials. All the links are listed in the podcast description.